On December 7th, 1941, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. After this event, although they did not know it at the time, Americans of Japanese ancestry were about to encounter heightened scrutiny against them. Their rights were about to be taken away, and their loyalty as American citizens were to be questioned.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
Following the bombings, Americans of Japanese descent were discriminated against and were segregated. Japanese Americans were displaced out of California, Oregon, and parts of Washington and Arizona. In April 1942, Japanese Americans were forced to evacuate from their houses and were only allowed to take what they could carry. By August 1942, they were forced from the West Coast and were temporarily placed in assembly centers. Eventually, 10 permanent internment camps across the United States were constructed. The internment camps were usually in isolated locations and surrounded with barbed wire to discourage escape. Extended families were crowded into 20 by 25 feet areas and had no privacy.
In fact, later on they classified all of us 4C, that's enemy alien. Can you imagine? We're all American citizens and they classify us as enemy aliens.
A year and a half later, on January 20th, 1944, the Selective Service was reinstated for all Japanese Americans, even those who were confined in the concentration camps. Men like Mr. Emi organized the Fair Play Committee at his Heart Mountain camp. Their purpose was to oppose all unfair practices that violated their constitutional rights. They issued a petition advising the internees on their draft notices.
We said that we won't refuse to go, but give us our rights back, treat us like American citizens, then we'll be glad to respond to the draft.
The FBI arrested the leaders of the Fair Play Committee, including Mr. Emi. These men were charged with conspiracy to violate the Selective Service Act and with counseling others to resist the draft. The men were sentenced to 4 years. On December 16, 1945, the U.S. Court of Appeals in Denver reversed their convictions and restored their rights as U.S. citizens. In March 1944, 63 internees at Heart Mountain refused to take their physical examinations. They were arrested. The trial of these draft resistors ended with their conviction and they were sentenced to 3 years imprisonment for violating the Service Act of 1940.
I did not enlist because I was sitting in a camp and I could not leave if I wanted to leave. In other words, I was being held there and my citizenship rights were being withheld.
On December 24th, 1947, President Truman granted a full pardon to all new state draft resistors and restored their full citizenship. The 100th Battalion Infantry Separate was activated on June 12, 1942. Made up of only Japanese Americans, the 100th earned top marks in performance. The battalion was assigned to the 34th Division and landed in Italy in 1943. They fought many battles, such as the fight for Monte Cassino. They almost completed the takeover of Monte Cassino, the famous monastery high atop a steep mountain, until they ran out of men and material. Later, 5 divisions were needed to take Monte Cassino. After countless casualties, the 100th merged with the 442nd Regiment and was sent to France. The 100th and 442nd Regimental Combat Team was made up of Japanese Americans, with most of its officers Caucasians. The regimental motto was "Go for Broke." This regiment was known as the most highly decorated unit for its size and duration of service in the history of the U.S. Army. Many Japanese Americans felt it was their responsibility to serve in the military because many wanted to show their loyalty to the United States and restore their rights guaranteed under the Constitution.
I volunteered. And then they told me, "You're too young." You see, 17 and almost 18. He said, "You're a little bit too young." He said, No, I'm 18. At that time, I felt that, by volunteering, I would I would be able to, if I was sent overseas and fight, I could prove my loyalty to the United States. You know, my feeling is to show my loyalty. That's the only way.
The 100th Battalion and 442nd went to fight one of the most 10 notable battles in U.S. history, the rescue of the Texas Lost Battalion. The Lost Battalion was the 1st Battalion, 141st Regiment of the 36th Division. They had pushed too far into German-held territory and were trapped. The 2nd and 3rd Battalions of the 36th Division had tried but could not rescue its own troops. The 100th and 442nd had just battled through thick forests to liberate the town of Bruyères. They were battle-weary after 2 weeks of heavy fighting and deserved to rest, but their rest was cut short when General Dahlquist ordered the troop to find the lost battalion. However, in rescuing the 200 or so men of the 36th Division, the 100th and 442nd lost more men than they rescued. There is still controversy today on whether General Dahlquist believed the 100th and 442nd were more capable or more expendable because of their ethnicity.
We suffered so much casualty that 1st Platoon Baker Company started out half strength. When we finished rescuing them, there was only 3 of us left in the platoon, and myself and 2 original 100th boys.
442nd came in the 100th without a bunch of kids out there, but they had GI uniforms on, and you know, my heart is always a friend of the Japanese people. And whenever I get a chance to thank somebody, I do.
Another group of unsung Japanese American heroes were those men who served in the Military Intelligence Service. The MIS was created before December 7, 1941 in the eventuality of a war, and was a special unit of men who could read and write the Japanese language. At first, it only consisted of 58 Nisei and 2 Caucasians learning Japanese at Camp Savage in Minnesota. This program was called the Military Intelligence Language School. The MIS was given the jobs of translating journals and interrogating POWs. These linguists accepted the incarceration of their families and their rights being taken away. They used their unique skills and knowledge against America's enemy, many feeling that it was their responsibility to serve and regain their rights. By the end of the war, according to General Willoughby's report, Nisei linguists had translated 20,598,051 pages. General MacArthur stated, "Never in history has an army known so much about the enemy prior to the actual engagement." After the war, most were given Purple Hearts, of which 9,486 were given for having a serious battle injury. Some other awards included 1 Medal of Honor, 560 Silver Stars, and 4,000 Bronze Stars. The armed services eventually became desegregated. However, it took over 47 years before Americans were even told about the MIS Nisei and how they helped in the war effort. As for the 442nd unit, it wasn't until the year 2000 that Congress recognized an additional 21 Japanese American Medal of Honor heroes who denied the honor back in 1945 on the basis of race discrimination. President Bill Clinton presented the medals. The Gaman Warriors were finally being recognized as men who rose above the tramplings of their rights by their own government to prove that loyalty comes from all responsible Americans, regardless of their ethnicity.
Rarely has a nation been so well served by a people it had so ill-treated.
Gaman means internal fortitude. It was through extraordinary perseverance, with Gaman in times of great adversity. The Gaman Warriors achieved success on the battlefield and at home. The actions of these men had a significant impact on all future generations because we learned how fragile our constitutional rights can be. These warriors took personal responsibility to protect our rights and proved that America includes Americans of all ancestry.
Because I raised my 2 boys, it doesn't make a difference what they look like or what ethnic group or what, we're all one. We're all Americans.